Daniel chapter 12, verse 11. And from the time that the daily shall be taken away, and the abomination that maketh desolate set up, there shall be 1,290 days. Revelation chapter 13, verse 2. And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, and his feet were as the feet of the bear, and his mouth as the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power, and his seat, and great authority. The Daily in the Book of Daniel and the New World Order, written by Marion Barry, copyrighted in 2002. Revising the hermeneutic principle found in the book The Daily. In a prophetic historical outline, the sequential order of verses may not be violated. Number 1. Number 2. The hermeneutic principle of the imperative of sequence and continuity in the exposition of prophetic outlines. Prophetic outline verses must be kept in strict sequence and matched consistently to the sequence and continuity of historical events. Number 3. Context is king. The hermeneutic principle of historical context, truth out of its setting is error. Number 4. The hermeneutic principle of language context. Context determines whether a timeline is given in literal or symbolic language. According to the Great Controversy, page 599, the language of the Bible is to be understood in its most obvious literal meaning unless a figure or symbol is employed. Number 5. The Bible is its own expositor of symbolism. Number 6. The hermeneutic principle of structural context permits the Bible to be its own expositor. It takes precedence over all human speculation. Number 7. The hermeneutic principle of contemporary recognition of prophetic fulfillment. Not until a prophecy is very near its fulfillment or already fulfilled are God's people able to know of surety the exact application of a prophecy. Number 8. The hermeneutic principle defines word meanings from the original Hebrew and Greek. Continuing with chapter 5 of the Daily, Paganism defined. The Daily was defined by the Millerites as paganism. A resume of the available historical records about the beliefs of those who gave the Judgment Hour cry, the Millerites, may be found in The Prophetic Faith of Our Fathers, Volume 4, pages 847, 848, and was written by Eli Froom. He composed a chart listing the main beliefs which were held by each great preacher in that day. That chart contains the Daily as one of the positions taken by those in that great Advent movement, and is listed under the heading of Paganism. Tracing the meaning of the word paganism. Over the decades, language changes. Some words become obsolete. Later generations find a word like paganism no longer in common use, and the meaning as used a century ago to be vague or meaningless. An old dictionary could be helpful, or old literature could give light on the usage in that day. A study of the events of that era or topics of conversation at that time can provide some insight as to how the Millerites understood and used the word paganism in reference to the Daily taken away in Daniel chapter 8. The Oxford English Dictionary, 2nd edition, volume 11, traces the word paganism as it was used in literature as far back as the 15th century, but it does not define the word, except to indicate that it did not refer to Jews or Christians, but rather to heathen people. The daily was spoken of as paganism. This definition of the daily is consistently called paganism in Uriah Smith's book, Thoughts on Daniel and Revelation. Eli Frooms also refers to the daily as paganism in his summary charts in The Prophetic Faith of Our Fathers. The Story of Daniel the Prophet by S.N. Haskell also defines it in the same way. In those books, when discussing imperial Rome, that empire was known as pagan Rome. The state religion was paganism that was based on sun worship. Sun worship was known as paganism. That was the terminology of that day. If one visits the Pantheon in Rome, it is self-evident that the statues, now named for the apostles, were sculpted first as the mythical Greek and Roman gods who represented sun worship. The stories or myths of Greek and Roman worship may be found in high school libraries and are often studied as the subject of literature classes. Paganism was another word for sun worship. The four empires which Daniel describes in his prophetic outlines were all sun worshippers. Israel was always surrounded with sun worshippers. From Babylon in 606 BC down to the end of time, Babylonian sun worship in one form or another has been the counterfeit of the worship of Jehovah. The emperor of Rome was a representative of the sun god. The religion of Rome was polytheistic, but it was a worship of the sun, and Sun Day was its day of celebration. The word pagan is basically a reference to sun worship, which was the official religion of Imperial Rome. Paganism, the official religion of Rome, was just another name for the Imperial Roman Empire. Paganism was a name for Imperial Rome. It is important to understand that pagan Rome fell in AD 476. The scepter of its power to rule, the daily, described as power, seat, and great authority in Revelation chapter 13, verse 2, was taken away from sun-worshipping pagan Rome and handed over to the Bishop of Rome, later known as the Pope. Paganism was the daily taken away. Those who gave the judgment hour cry before 1844 described the action wherein the daily, or power, seat, and authority of the Caesars over the empire of imperial sun-worshipping Rome was taken away from them and transferred to the popes. The Millerites and early Adventists abbreviated their prophetic exposition on the daily to the one word paganism. The Millerite and those who gave the judgment hour cry equated the ruling power of imperial Rome with its state religion, which was pagan worship. They referred to it all as one and the same thing and simply called Rome paganism. They abbreviated their explanation of the daily taken away as it referred both to pagan Rome itself and to the transfer of the power to rule from pagan imperial Rome over to the papacy with only one word, paganism. S.N. Haskell's explanation of the daily. Ellen G. White spoke of S.N. Haskell as the best Bible student of that day, no doubt because of his keen perception and skillful explanations of the subjects at hand. His use of the word daily or paganism is as follows, found in the book The Story of Daniel the Prophet, page 128, S.N. Haskell. Paganism, the daily, of Daniel chapter 8 verse 12 was taken away. It is true, and Rome became nominally a Christian empire. Her emperor professed the name of Christ and carried before his army the banner of the cross. To John, this transfer from paganism to the papacy is represented as a transfer of power from the dragon to the beast, according to Revelation chapter 13 verse 7. The above quotation should settle the matter as to what the correct view was before 1844 on the daily by those who gave the judgment hour cry. It was the horizontal view of a transfer of power, seat, and great authority from pagan to papal Rome. If the reader is still in doubt, it is suggested that he read the entire chapter titled The Eighth Chapter of Daniel. See pages 119 to 135. Chapter 6. The Correct View of the Daily. This is written in early writings, pages 74 and 75. The correct view of the daily. Then I saw in relation to the daily in Daniel chapter 8 verse 12 that the Lord gave the correct view of it to those who gave the judgment hour cry. When union existed before 1844, nearly all were united on the correct view of the daily. But in the confusion since 1844, other views have been embraced and darkness and confusion have followed. God has revealed to us through a vision given to an inspired prophet, Ellen G. White, the fact that there was a correct view of the daily taken away. That correct view existed when there was union or a united view by those who gave the judgment hour cry. Those who gave the judgment hour cry were the Millerites, or those engaged in the Great Advent movement before 1844. Their message was called the Judgment Hour Cry because they believed that Jesus would come in 1844 to perform an executive judgment or that he would judge the earth by fire. It is our privilege to discover that correct view by seeking to understand the historical setting and line of thought of those who lived at that time. The Millerite error. The Millerites who gave the judgment hour cry misunderstood the event which was to occur at the end of the 2300 day of year timeline, which states, "Unto 2300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed." Daniel chapter 8 verse 14. They assumed that the sanctuary to be cleansed at that time was the earth, and that Jesus would come to judge and to cleanse the earth on October 22nd, 1844. The Millerite error resulted in the great disappointment of 1844. On October 22nd, they experienced what is known as the Great Disappointment of 1844. The insincere and careless followers of that movement quickly dropped out and faded away. That left only a very small company determined to continue the study of the scriptures to discover where they had made their mistake. The study of the sanctuary corrected their error. Their faithfulness to the Word of God was rewarded when the Holy Spirit directed their minds to the sanctuary, which was built by Moses, described in the Old Testament, and explained in the book of Hebrews. God blessed their efforts by giving them new light on the original sanctuary, which is in heaven, and Christ's work of investigative judgment and final atonement to be accomplished before his return. They were then given the commission to take the three angels' messages to all the world. Revelation chapter 10, verse 11. The cause of the great disappointment of 1844. What caused the great disappointment of 1844? Was it caused by their view of the daily taken away, a transfer of the scepter of power, power to rule, as taken away from Imperial Rome in AD 538 and transferred to the popes in Rome? Or was the disappointment caused by their mistaken view in assuming that the sanctuary was this earth? A crucial theological issue. There is much confusion on this matter. Were they wrong in their understanding that the daily concerned a political transfer of power down here on earth? Should their eyes have been directed upward to the heavenly sanctuary and the priesthood of Jesus Christ? Was the daily actually referring to Christ's ministry instead of the political transfer of power down here on earth? This is a very crucial question and must be answered. The daily and the 2300-year timeline are not the same thing. The daily and the 2300-year timeline, although related in Daniel chapter 8, are two completely different things. The daily taken away described political events down here on earth, which could be observed by God's people, enabling them to identify the little horn as it rose to power in AD 538. But the 2300-year timeline, which ended in AD 1844, pointed to Christ's expanded ministry in the investigative judgment in heaven, which would ultimately bring the little horn to its end. God's people need to understand both the rise to power of the little horn in AD 538 and that heavenly process which will bring it to its end. The horizontal and vertical aspects of the book of Daniel. The book of Daniel has a vertical and horizontal aspect in its presentation. Daniel refers not only to the rise and fall of empires down here on earth on an horizontal plane, but it also provides a vertical view of that which occurs in heaven. Both have their important place and must not be confused, or one crowd out the other. The subject of the heavenly sanctuary must not be confused with the subject of the earthly daily taken away. It is true that the question in Daniel chapter 8 verse 13 was concerning the little horn as to when it would be brought to judgment. The answer to that question is in Daniel chapter 8 verse 14. The process of the investigative judgment would begin in 1844 and extend to the end of the millennium, when the little horn would be broken without hand and destroyed in the lake of fire. It would be nearly impossible to know how the little horn established the papal supremacy that reigned over Europe for 1260 years if its rise to political power were not described and explained in Daniel chapter 8 verses 11 to 13. If those actions listed in Daniel chapter 8 verses 11 to 13 that describe the establishment of the first papal supremacy from AD 538 to 1798 are not recognized, then the future reign as described in Revelation chapter 13 and Daniel 12 cannot be recognized either, because new truth ever rests on old truth. The daily must not be confused with the sanctuary. It was not the view held by the Millerite on the daily that was in error that caused the great disappointment. That was the correct view of the daily. It was the erroneous view of the word sanctuary which caused them to predict the wrong event at the end of the 2300-day year timeline. So let's make it clear. It was not their view of the daily that was in error that caused the great disappointment, because Mrs. White confirms it was the correct view of the daily that they had at the time. It was actually the erroneous view of the word sanctuary which caused them to predict the wrong event at the end of the 2300-day year timeline. Adventism received the prophetic gift. After 1844, the faithful company that returned to the study of the Word of God was rewarded when God bestowed upon them the prophetic gift in the person named Ellen G. White. She called herself a handmaiden of the Lord, but she described herself and her work as encompassing more than that of a prophet. Her work extended over many years and was comprehensive, covering many aspects of education, medical and spiritual concern, and the many aspects of the Christian lifestyle. Her vision gave courage to the believers, strengthening the outreach programs of the church. The prophet did not run ahead of the loud cry. Ellen G. White, as a prophet, did not attempt to pry open the meaning of the daily in all its fullness before its appointed time for the end or the last generation. However, her visions provided the necessary information for the last generation to unlock that puzzle and arrived at the correct view at the correct time. And we continue with the correct view now declared by the prophet. Very, very important. Her complete statement regarding the daily is as follows. Early writing, pages 74 and 75. Then I saw in vision, in relation to the daily, in Daniel chapter 8, verse 12, that the word sacrifice was supplied by man's wisdom and does not belong to the text, and that the Lord gave the correct view of it to those who gave the judgment hour cry before AD 1844. When union existed before 1844, nearly all were united on the correct view of the daily. But in the confusion since 1844, other views have been embraced, and darkness and confusion have followed. Prophetic guidance for us on the daily. Ellen G. White revealed what she had seen in vision in regard to the daily sacrifice. That, number one, the word sacrifice does not belong to the text. Number two, the Lord gave the correct view to those who gave the judgment hour cry before 1844. Number three, after 1844, other views were embraced. Number four, darkness and confusion followed the other views. The supplied word sacrifice in italics in many Bibles shows that it was not in the original Hebrew, but added by the translator, and has brought about confusion and darkness. The good Bible student needs to cross out the word sacrifice in Daniel chapter 8, verse 11, verse 12, verse 13, and Daniel chapter 11, verse 31, and Daniel chapter 12, verse 11. All have added the word sacrifice in those verses combined with the daily and it was added by the translator. It does not belong to the text. Old views versus new views of the daily. The various attempts to pry open the meaning of the daily were all considered new views. Those who gave the Judgment Hour cry put all those old views aside and introduced their new view. But today, many theologians refer to the new view as the old view, thus complicating the subject. The imperative of knowing the correct view today. Why is the correct view of the daily so important to us today? It is important because the correct view of the daily, as it was used in Daniel chapter 8, revealed how the papal supremacy received its political power in AD 533-38. The same correct view, when applied consistently to the entire book of Daniel, including chapter 12, also reveals how the papal supremacy will receive its political power in the future reign. So, we understood that the AD, as mentioned here, 533 to up to 538, that's when the papacy started its first papal supremacy, which by prophecy timeline terminated in 1798. However, chapter 12 is announcing another papal supremacy, which we can call number 2. Prophecy revealed the little horn of Daniel chapter 7 and chapter 8 and to be the papal supremacy which reigned and persecuted the saints for 1260 years. Daniel 12 reveals the papal power that will persecute again for a literal 1260 literal days and reign again for a literal 1290 days. Daniel chapters 8 and 9 correspond with Revelation 13 to identify the beast whose head was wounded in 1798. We are seeing the process of the healing today and will soon see a new world order with its papal head fulfilling Revelation chapter 13 verse 3, wherein all the world wondered after the beast, as it is announced as mentioned in the book of Revelation chapter 13 verse 3. Modern Christendom cannot understand the prophetic portions of Daniel and Revelation. Today, few in Christendom can identify the little horn of Daniel chapter 7 and chapter 8. They have no idea of the meaning of the daily. Therefore, they cannot identify the beast of Revelation chapter 13. They cannot recognize the prophecies being fulfilled right before their eyes. Those in Adventism need to understand these prophecies, or they will soon fall into the stupor and darkness of Babylon. Every true and faithful Adventist will need to understand the correct view of the daily. Daniel chapters 8 and 11 verse 31 that explains how the papal supremacy of the past gained its power, seat, and great authority. The correct view of the daily in Daniel chapter 12 verse 11 will also identify the future papal supremacy, explaining how it will gain political control again, so that all the world, according to Revelation chapter 13 verse 3, will wonder after the beast. The book of Daniel is the story of the rise and fall of empires, and the last chapter explains the rise and fall of the future papal supremacy over the whole world. Daniel chapter 12 verse 11 cannot be understood until the correct view of the daily is unsealed. Incorrect views on the daily contribute to darkness and confusion. Other views, which came in after 1844, assumed that the daily is Christ's ministry in heaven and has brought in darkness and confusion. Not until the correct view and all its political, down-to-earth meaning is established firmly will the darkness and confusion regarding the meaning of the last chapter of Daniel, chapter 12, be cleared away. The correct view of the daily will unlock the three timelines of Daniel chapter 12, verses 7 to 13, so that their message can go forth in the loud cry with the great power and glory of the angel of Revelation chapter 18, verses 1 to 3. And Revelation 18, verses 1 to 3 is actually the loud cry to be given at this time of Earth history. The next study will be on chapter 7, the daily sacrifice. The word sacrifice does not belong to the text. Until then, we encourage you to study now from the beginning to page 51, to revise also the hermeneutic principles that we have learned from number 1, it goes all the way to number 8. We have not added any yet, and this will come in the next study. Until then, may the Lord bless you and cause his face to shine upon you and give you peace always.